Hey there! In this screencast, I'm going to explain to you how to read something called a climograph and to read what is known as a Gershmal diagram. So that's my goal with this screencast, that you should know how to read these two types of diagrams. But just to sort of get you in the zone, you should first take a look at these three very different ecosystems. So we have a tropical rainforest, we have a tundra area over here, and we have a hot desert down here. And we can use then the climographs and the Gershmal diagrams to both illustrate and also explain why we see very different plant communities developing in different areas of the world. So first, if we take a look at this map, we can see that climate obviously have an effect on the type of plant community, the type of ecosystem that develops in a certain area. This shows the primary production in all the different places in the world, and you can see that it looks like there is a higher production where it's warm. And it also seems that in the very dry areas such as this and over here, we don't have very much primary production taking place. So just by looking at this map, we can already say that both temperature and rainfall must have an effect on the type of community that develops in a certain area. And we can use a climograph to explain this, basically, what type of ecosystem or what type of vegetation will be present in different areas of the world. And we refer to those communities, those ecosystems, as climax communities. In another video, another guy will explain about succession, how ecosystems evolve over time, and the climax community is sort of the end point of succession. So that is the community that we end up with at the end of sort of the development of the ecosystem. But you can see that, like we already decided from the previous slide, that annual rainfall, precipitation, is very important. So we have that on one of the axes in this diagram, and on the other axis we have temperature. And different combinations of annual precipitation and mean annual temperature will result in different climate communities. So if it's very dry and very hot, we get hot deserts. If it's very humid, very wet, so to speak, and very warm, we would get a tropical rainforest. If it's very cold and we have very little annual precipitation, we would get a tundra. And then we have these different types of forest and grassland somewhere in the middle. So this is a climograph, and you should know how to read this type of diagram. There is a worksheet on this a little later. Then there's another type of diagram, and these are called Gershmal diagrams. And what they model is how nutrients are recycled in different ecosystems. And they always have these three circles. So one circle would be biomass, one circle would be litter, and one circle would be soil. So these are the different stores where nutrients can be. So nutrients can be in the biomass, in the litter. This is the dead organic matter. Or they could be in the soil, right? So if they're in the biomass, then a nitrogen could be part of an amino acid. It would then maybe still be part of that amino acid when it falls on the ground, and then eventually that amino acid would be broken down and become inorganic nitrate in the soil. So that would be one example. And apart from showing the different stores, the arrows show how the nutrients then move from one store to another, the transfer of nutrients. So when tissue dies, for instance, then nutrients stored in the biomass would fall to the ground, fall to the forest floor, and stay there or lay there in the form of litter. And when the litter is then decomposed, some of the nutrients would then be released to the soil. So that's what these arrows show. We also have some arrows coming in sort of from the outside. So we could have an input into the litter in the form of molecules that comes in with the rain. We could also have some of these nutrients in the litter lost in the form of runoff. So nutrients would be taken away from that area. And down here in the soil, we could get an input from weathering rocks. And we could also lose some of the inorganic nutrients due to leaching, so they would be washed away by the water. And the size of those circles shows how big a store is this. And the thickness or the size of the arrows show sort of the rate of transfer from one store to another. So in this rainforest that we're looking at here, we can see that most of the nutrients are found in the biomass, for instance. And in your book, in the option handout, that's the PDF that I have that were uploaded to previous modules, so hopefully you have downloaded it. You have this figure C18, that have 3 different examples of Gersimow diagrams, one for the tropical rainforest, one for a desert, and one for the taiga, a temperate northern type of forest. And you can see again, like before, that we have the 3 circles showing the 3 different stores, and we have the arrows showing the transfer and also showing how nutrients can come in from the outside and be lost again. And you can see that there's quite a difference between these 3 different types of ecosystems or types of communities. So again in the worksheet, the upcoming worksheet, you will be asked to explain why there are these differences. So use the information in the handout to write an explanation of this, right? But if we start off with the rainforest, for instance, then there is a lot of nutrients stored in the biomass, very little in the litter, and very little in the soil. So this is a big circle because most of the nutrients are in the biomass. We can then also see that the transfer of nutrients from the litter to the soil, and from the soil and to the biomass, is high, the rate of transfer. So as soon as a leaf falls to the ground, it's decomposed, and as soon as some of the nutrients are released into the soil, they're taken up again by the biomass. So these 2 sort of transfers are happening very quickly. Yes, and we could also see that the transfer of nutrients from the biomass to the litter is sort of slow, and that's because most of the biomass is actually used by animals or fungi or other things. So actually most of the biomass is used and doesn't fall to the forest floor at all. It's taken up by other species on its way. Yes, and like I said to you in the worksheet that you should complete, there are these 3 different pictures where you are asked to explain the difference between these 3 Gersimow diagrams. Yes, and that's a worksheet called Climagraph and Gersimow diagrams. So that's what you should do now. Bye for now.